Good evening, or whatever chaotic hour you crawled in from, because trust me, the clock doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you showed up in a state the rest of the world can't even put into words. You feel that, don't you? That weird static under your skin, like your pulse finally figured out its true job description. People keep staring at you like you broke something important. And maybe you did. Maybe you snapped a little piece of the old world in half just by existing differently today. Because you didn't just level up. You entered a state nobody can explain. Nobody has a clue how you did it. Veterans, the ones who used to talk with their chest out like they owned the place, are suddenly blinking at you like their entire belief system is buffering. They're watching you with that uncomfortable mix of respect and fear, like they've trained their whole life for a race, and suddenly discovered you weren't even on the track. You were underground, building a whole new engine. You know the part that rattles them. It's not the state you entered. It's the fact that you walked into it like you were just done being small. You didn't ask for permission. You didn't wait for someone to validate you. You didn't fill out a form or consult a mentor or read a guidebook. You just stepped into something raw, something different, something yours. And now, the veterans are second-guessing every rule they ever passed down like gospel. Because deep down, they're realizing you didn't break the system. You just stopped worshiping it. And once you stop worshiping old rules, old fears, old limits, you start doing things that make people question their entire story mode. That's the part that scares them the most. The fact that you didn't try to threaten them. You just existed at a higher voltage, and suddenly their decades of experience don't feel like armor anymore. They feel like dead weight. You can see it in their faces. They're replaying moments from years ago, wondering, did I waste time? Did I settle too hard? Did I ever even touch the edge this person just walked into? And while they're drowning in introspection, you're over here, breathing easier for the first time. Because this new state, it isn't some mystical zone for the chosen few. It's what happens when you finally get sick of shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. It's what happens when you stop negotiating with fear, like fear is your landlord. You dragged your pain by the throat into the present and weaponized it. You took every scar and made it a fuse. You learned that surviving wasn't the assignment thriving was. And that shift, that tiny internal rebellion, that's the thing no one can explain. Because there's no formula for someone who finally decides to stop being afraid of their own potential. People keep saying, well, there has to be a reason they suddenly got this good. Yeah, the reason is you got tired of being average at a life you were supposed to dominate. You didn't evolve slowly. You snapped. You cracked open a version of yourself that refuses to play the old game. You created a gravity the veterans can feel but can't copy. So now they stand at the sidelines, trying to reverse engineer you, trying to figure out the glitch, trying to spot the trick. There is no trick. There's just you, finally uncaged. And let me tell you something they'll never admit out loud. You are their worst fear, wrapped in potential they never had the nerve to chase. Because you're not following their blueprint. You're burning it. You're showing them what happens when a person stops apologizing for wanting more. You're moving like someone who realized mediocrity is a costume you outgrew months ago. You're talking like someone who stopped asking life to be gentle. You're walking like someone who finally understands that pressure doesn't destroy diamonds. It just exposes the ones pretending. You didn't just enter a new state. You entered the one that makes the old guard whisper to each other at night. The one that keeps them replaying your moves like surveillance footage. The one that forces them to question every moment they played it safe. And here's the crazy part. You're nowhere near your final form. This is you still warming up. This is you still figuring out what the buttons do. This is the prologue. Imagine how much louder the veterans will tremble when you stop fighting yourself. Imagine how unrecognizable you'll become when you finally realize this state wasn't an accident, it was inevitable. You can feel the shift in the room the moment you breathe in. People pretend they're not watching, but their eyes keep drifting back to you, like they're checking if the glitch is still there. And yeah, it is. It's humming under your skin like a warning siren that learned how to smile. What hits them hardest is the casual way you carry it. You're not bragging, you're not loud, you're not trying to convince anyone of anything. You're just existing at a frequency they've never tuned into, and it messes with them more than any victory ever could. They whisper to each other like you're some unsolved case file. This person, this moment, this state. They keep poking at it mentally, trying to make it make sense, because if they can't explain it, they have to face something uglier. The possibility that you didn't get lucky, you just stopped crawling when everyone else stayed on their knees. And it's wild watching them unravel, because you can see the realization hit them in waves. That thing you crossed into it didn't come from technique or tradition or decades of polished habits. It came from the parts of you they never trained for, the nights you barely slept, the days you moved through life with your teeth clenched, the moments when quitting felt like mercy, but you kept going anyway, and each time you did, something sharpened. You built an edge they can't replicate, because it isn't made from knowledge, it's made from survival. They're standing there clutching their resumes while you're powered by the stuff they tried to outrun. Your mistakes, your heartbreaks, your losses, your private wars, every piece they told you to get over. You turned it into architecture. You're confusing them because you're not performing greatness. You're living it. In this messy, raw, imperfect way that feels too real for people who built their confidence out of routines. And honestly, there's this electric honesty to you now. This vibe that says you're not seeking approval, because you finally realized approval isn't a prize, it's a leash. You cut it, and they see the slack rope dragging behind you, and they feel something tighten around their own throats. A reminder that they stayed obedient to limits you walked right through. You're moving like someone who finally admitted to themselves that the ceiling was only ever drywall. One good swing from your willpower, and it caved in. You're still brushing the dust off your shoulders, while veterans stare at the hole you made like it's a miracle. That's the part that keeps them uneasy. The simplicity of it. You didn't wait for the perfect timing. You didn't wait for permission. You just reached that point where you were done letting fear run the math on your potential, and something in your spirit said, "All right, I'll go anyway." And that's when the state opened. Not with fireworks, not with fanfare, but with quiet inevitability. Like your life had been pushing you toward this moment since the beginning, and all you did was stop resisting the pull. Veterans look at you and see someone who doesn't hesitate anymore, and hesitation is their whole comfort zone. They see someone who speaks with that unfiltered tone, of a person who finally realized their voice wasn't made to be polite. It was made to be true. You walk with this grounded intensity, like you're not chasing anything, You're just claiming what was always meant for you, but required a version of you that didn't exist before. You became that version, and while they're trying to follow the steps, trying to dissect the moment, trying to decode the shift, you're already drifting further into that unexplainable state. The one that feels like power and clarity had a conversation in your bloodstream and decided to stick around. You're unsettling every room you walk into, not because you're threatening, but because you're undeniable. You can feel it in the way people pause mid-sentence when you walk by, like their instincts are trying to warn them they're witnessing a version of you that doesn't fit in the old folders they filed you under. There's this tension in the air, this quiet awareness that something in you isn't operating on the same tired settings anymore. And honestly, it rattles them in a way they'll never admit out loud. The veterans keep glancing your direction with that tight little expression, the one that says they're trying to act unbothered while their whole internal compass spins like it's lost signal. They're replaying your moves in their heads, rewinding tiny moments, checking every detail like there must have been a tell, a hint, a crack in the timeline where they could have predicted this shift. There wasn't, because you didn't evolve on a schedule. You detonated. You stepped into this new internal territory with that accidental swagger of someone who finally figured out their own worth by tripping over it. You didn't walk in with a plan. You walked in with history. And history has weight, man. It has teeth. It has this way of shaping a person in silence until one day the shape stops fitting the old world. That's where you are. This state you're in, it's not polished. It's not curated. It's not the kind of greatness people brag about on resumes. You're showing them what happens when a person finally decides they're done living smaller than their potential, and it forces them to examine all the excuses they built entire years around. You can see it in their posture, in the way they inhale a little too sharply, in the silent moments where they look away from you because something in your presence hits a nerve they've been avoiding. It's like you walked into the room holding a truth they tried to forget existed, and every second you stay in that state, it gets harder for them to pretend they're unaffected. It's almost funny watching the shift in their eyes, that tiny flicker that gives them away every single time. They look at you, then look at the floor, then look anywhere except back at you. Because facing you means facing the uncomfortable math of their own choices. And you can feel it, this heavy awareness settling in the space between you and them. Like the air itself knows something changed in you that can't be undone. There's this tension in your presence now, not the aggressive kind, more like a quiet gravity that pulls the truth out of people whether they want it out or not. You're standing there in this unexplainable state, and it's wild how you're not even trying to project anything. You're just being. And that's somehow louder than their decades of practiced confidence. It hits them because you're not performing strength. You're living from a place they've never touched. You're speaking from wounds that healed ugly and powerful. You're moving like each step is backed by every moment you survived when no one knew what you were carrying. That kind of energy doesn't come from experience. It comes from endurance. They spent years polishing their image, sharpening their posture, curating their persona. You spent years clawing your way through internal storms they didn't even notice. And now that both paths finally stand in the same room, it's obvious which one forged something unbreakable. You talk with this grounded honesty that doesn't ask for permission. You pause when your thoughts need space, not when the room expects silence. Your voice has that layered texture of someone who's been through enough to stop sugarcoating anything. And every time you speak, it lands differently, heavier, realer, like it's shaped by weight instead of theory. The veterans catch themselves nodding at things they used to dismiss. They're studying your reactions, your tone, the way your eyes hold steady even in the quiet moments. They keep trying to convince themselves it's luck or timing or some fluke moment of momentum you'll eventually slip out of. But the truth keeps nagging at them. This isn't a phase. This is who you were always supposed to be. There's something almost unsettling about the way you breathe now. Not rushed, not anxious, just this relaxed intensity, like you're finally aligned with yourself for the first time in years. And that alignment is the part they can't replicate, no matter how long they've been in the game. You're untethered in a way that scares people who built their identity around rules and structure. You're unpredictable in the most controlled way, like your moves come from instinct sharpened beyond their understanding. You're no longer seeking approval, and that alone strips power from anyone who once thought they had authority over your path. It's the way you listen without flinching, the way you respond without shrinking, the way your presence fills the room without you having to raise your voice or adjust your posture. You're carrying a kind of authenticity that cuts through everyone's defenses before they even realize what's happening. The veterans feel that. They feel it in their chest, in that quiet panic that whispers maybe they missed something along the way. Maybe the path they trusted wasn't the only one. Maybe the kid they underestimated tapped into something deeper than mastery, something closer to truth. And every time they glance at you, that possibility hits them all over again, sharper than before. It gets clearer with every passing moment. This quiet shift in the atmosphere whenever you move, like the room itself adjusts around you without waiting for your permission. People pretend they don't feel it, but their bodies give them away. That tiny inhale when you step closer, that stalled blink when your eyes lock onto theirs, that half-second delay before they respond. Like they're recalibrating in real time. You're not trying to intimidate anyone. That's the part that throws them off. You're just standing there with this lived-in certainty, and it hits harder than any forced confidence ever could. It's the kind of presence that comes from surviving chapters nobody clapped for, and it radiates off you like heat from pavement after a long day. You can see the veterans fighting this internal battle with themselves. You're showing them what happens when a person finally decides they're done living smaller than their potential, and it forces them to examine all the excuses they built entire years around. You can see it in their posture, in the way they inhale a little too sharply, in the silent moments where they look away from you because something in your presence hits a nerve they've been avoiding. It's like you walked into the room holding a truth they tried to forget existed, and every second you stay in that state, it gets harder for them to pretend they're unaffected. It's almost funny watching the shift in their eyes, that tiny flicker that gives them away every single time. They look at you, then look at the floor, then look anywhere except back at you. Because facing you means facing the uncomfortable math of their own choices. And you can feel it, this heavy awareness settling in the space between you and them. Like the air itself knows something changed in you that can't be undone. There's this tension in your presence now, not the aggressive kind, more like a quiet gravity that pulls the truth out of people whether they want it out or not. You're standing there in this unexplainable state, and it's wild how you're not even trying to project anything. You're just being, and that's somehow louder than their decades of practiced confidence. It hits them Because you're not performing strength. You're living from a place they've never touched. You're speaking from wounds that healed ugly and powerful. You're moving like each step is backed by every moment you survived when no one knew what you were carrying. That kind of energy doesn't come from experience. It comes from endurance. They spent years polishing their image, sharpening their posture, curating their persona. You spent years clawing your way through internal storms they didn't even notice. And now that both paths finally stand in the same room, it's obvious which one forged something unbreakable. You talk with this grounded honesty that doesn't ask for permission. You pause when your thoughts need space, not when the room expects silence. Your voice has that layered texture of someone who's been through enough to stop sugarcoating anything. And every time you speak, it lands differently, heavier, realer, like it's shaped by weight instead of theory. The veterans catch themselves nodding at things they used to dismiss. They're studying your reactions, your tone, the way your eyes hold steady even in the quiet moments. They keep trying to convince themselves it's luck or timing or some fluke moment of momentum you'll eventually slip out of. But the truth keeps nagging at them. This isn't a phase. This is who you were always supposed to be. There's something almost unsettling about the way you breathe now. Not rushed, not anxious, just this relaxed intensity, like you're finally aligned with yourself for the first time in years. And that alignment is the part they can't replicate, no matter how long they've been in the game. You're untethered in a way that scares people who built their identity around rules and structure. You're unpredictable in the most controlled way, like your moves come from instinct sharpened beyond their understanding. You're no longer seeking approval, and that alone strips power from anyone who once thought they had authority over your path. It's the way you listen without flinching, the way you respond without shrinking, the way your presence fills the room without you having to raise your voice or adjust your posture. You're carrying a kind of authenticity that cuts through everyone's defenses before they even realize what's happening. The veterans feel that. They feel it in their chest, in that quiet panic that whispers maybe they missed something along the way. Maybe the path they trusted wasn't the only one. Maybe the kid they underestimated tapped into something deeper than mastery, something closer to truth. And every time they glance at you, that possibility hits them all over again, sharper than before. It gets clearer with every passing moment. This quiet shift in the atmosphere whenever you move, like the room itself adjusts around you without waiting for your permission. People pretend they don't feel it, but their bodies give them away. That tiny inhale when you step closer, that stalled blink when your eyes lock onto theirs, that half-second delay before they respond, like they're recalibrating in real time. You're not trying to intimidate anyone. That's the part that throws them off. You're just standing there with this lived-in certainty, and it hits harder than any forced confidence ever could. It's the kind of presence that comes from surviving chapters nobody clapped for, and it radiates off you like heat from pavement after a long day. You can see the veterans fighting this internal battle with themselves. They run through old memories, searching for the moment you became a threat. They replay conversations looking for clues. They analyze your posture, your tone, your timing, anything that might explain the shift. But the truth keeps slipping through their fingers because you didn't grow in the light they expected. You grew in the dark they never saw. There's a rawness in your energy they can't decode. You carry yourself like someone who's been broken in ways that built new architecture inside you. You talk like every word is backed by something real, something earned, something they can't imitate no matter how many years they've logged on the board. And that's the thing. They're not doubting you. They're doubting themselves. Hey, you. Yeah, you sitting there pretending you're just watching a video. Like this isn't the exact moment your whole damn life starts shifting. Good. Stay right there. This one's for you. They whisper he's bad news. They talk like he's some storm no one can outrun, some wild thing the city barely survives. They hype him up like he's untouchable, like his chaos is something carved into the concrete. They keep telling each other stories about how he can't be stopped, how he's too unpredictable, too ruthless, too far gone. But then there's you, and they don't get it. They don't get why the so-called monster hesitates when you step in. They don't see how his whole vibe shifts when your shadow shows up. They don't hear the way the noise in his head goes quiet when your name comes up. They don't understand why the Chaos King suddenly looks small. See, you're the one thing he can't calculate. You're the one variable that bends the whole damn equation. You walk into the room and his entire narrative snaps like cheap plastic. You don't match his energy. You erase it. You've been wandering through this world acting like you don't know what you're capable of. Like you're supposed to fear people just because everyone else does. Like you don't see the cracks in their masks, the weakness behind their volume. But you do. You always have. And that's what rattles him. That's what rattles everybody. Because there's something dangerous about someone who was never scared to begin with. You don't buy the headlines. You don't worship the myth. You don't react the way they expect. You look him dead in the eye and you break the spell. And trust me, nothing terrifies a legend more than someone who refuses to kneel. People think power is loud. Explosions, threats, neon lights, big speeches. Nah. Power is the quiet way you walk in, like you already know how the scene ends. It's the unbothered tone in your voice when his chaos is peaking. It's the way you don't flinch when he throws the world around like a toy. Because you know something he doesn't want to admit. His entire persona, his whole crazy act, it falls apart the second you stop entertaining it. You're the one thing that cuts through the madness. You're the one thing that forces him to confront himself. You don't shut his shit down by overpowering him. You do it by existing. That's the part that burns him the most. There's a point in every person's life where they realize they're not the prey. They're the stormbreaker. And whether you meant to or not, you've hit that point. You've become the person whose silence is a threat, whose presence is a verdict, whose confidence slices through the noise like a blade pulled slow. He acts wild around everyone else because he can. But around you, he's exposed, disarmed, human. And nothing is more humiliating for a man who built his reputation on being untouchable. The truth is, you don't just shut down his crazy shit. You annihilate it. All those twisted theatrics he throws out to intimidate the city, you read right through them. All that bad boy energy he uses to keep people guessing. You see the blueprint. All that chaos he hides behind because he's terrified of being seen. You walk straight through it like smoke. You dismantle him without raising your voice, without breaking sweat, without even trying. And maybe that scares you a little too. Because deep down, you know you've always had this power. You just never used it intentionally. But now you're starting to realize something uncomfortable and kind of thrilling. You're the one the city should have whispered about. Not him, you. Because when it comes down to it, you're the end of the story he pretends he's writing. You're the person he can't outrun. You're the one who sees straight through the madness he hides behind. Every legend has an opponent who doesn't play by the same script. Every monster has the one person who doesn't blink. Every unstoppable force eventually meets the immovable soul. And that's you. The one who didn't ask for the role. The one who didn't chase the spotlight. The one who accidentally became the only person capable of stopping the chaos everyone else surrendered to. He's bad news, sure, but you're the news he can't handle, and he knows it. So keep walking the way you do. Keep holding that unshakable energy that ruins his entire act. Keep being the one thing he can't predict, can't manipulate, can't intimidate. Because when the city trembles at his footsteps, you're the one who stays standing. And that's all it takes to turn a monster into a memory. You keep moving through the world with that same steady, unshakable pace. And it hits him harder every time, like he keeps waiting for you to crack, waiting for you to flinch, waiting for you to react the way everyone else does, and you just don't. And yeah, it messes with him more than he'd ever admit. There's this moment he gets, right before he does something reckless, when he glances your way like he's checking if you're watching, because your reaction has become the one he measures himself against, even if he pretends he's above all that. Your presence drags the truth out of him in a way nothing else does, and it's wild how natural it is for you, like there's no big speech, no dramatic wind blowing your coat around. You're just existing, just breathing. Then the whole atmosphere shifts. The temperature drops a little. His bravado thins out. He becomes painfully aware he's not as untouchable as he sells himself to be. People keep hyping him up like he's the final boss of this city, like he's pure entropy wrapped in skin. But honestly, the only time he looks like a real threat is when you're not in the frame. Because the second you appear, his chaos starts glitching, almost like his whole identity was coded without factoring in you. And now you're rewriting his parameters just by standing there. And there's this strange thing that happens in the quiet moments, when no one's watching, when he's not performing. He looks tired, not weak, not defeated, just tired in that way people get when they finally meet the one person who sees through them. It's like he can't hide behind the crazy anymore, because you've already mapped out the pattern beneath it. That's the part that really destabilizes him. You don't just shut down his madness, you dismantle the reason he even uses it. You force clarity into a mind that's spent years digging tunnels to escape it. And you do it without theatrics, without lifting a finger, without raising your voice. It's your steadiness that unnerves him, the way you stay grounded even when he's throwing emotional grenades like some overinvested drama addict. There's something about your calm that feels almost surgical. You cut straight through the noise he weaponizes. You take away the audience he relies on. You turn his chaos into background static. And that's when the city starts noticing the shift. Not because he changed, but because you stopped absorbing the performance. You stopped holding space for his narrative. You stopped giving his madness anything to bounce off. Everything he does hits the floor instead of hitting you. And he can't stand it. There's power in that. Not the loud kind he thrives on, but the kind that rewrites gravity in a room. The kind that makes people realize strength doesn't have to roar to be lethal. You walk in with this energy that says, I'm not impressed, I'm not intimidated, and I'm definitely not playing your game. And he folds in ways the city never thought possible. Your presence turns his legend into a rumor. Your confidence turns his chaos into a tantrum. Your clarity turns his unpredictability into a predictable pattern. And yeah, maybe you don't even fully realize what you're carrying. Not yet, not entirely. But every step you take, every moment you refuse to be pulled into his storm, every time you stay solid while he spirals, you're proving something he's been terrified to confront. You're the one person who strips the magic out of his madness. You're the one force he can't manipulate, can't provoke, can't unnerve. You're the one presence that makes him face the version of himself he's spent years avoiding. And the thing he hates most is how effortlessly you do it. He built a whole mythology out of being untouchable. But you walk in and it collapses like a set piece. He tries to rise above everyone else, but he sinks the second your eyes lock with his. He reaches for chaos like it's armor, but it cracks the moment your silence hits him. And there's this subtle shift happening each time you show up. The city watches him for the spectacle, but he watches you for the truth. The kind that doesn't need fire or screaming or dramatic music to be real. You've become the gravity around him, not because you chased power, not because you demanded authority, but because something in you refuses to bend, something in you refuses to shrink, something in you refuses to let chaos pretend to be control. And that's the thing that keeps shaking him, pulling at the loose threads of his identity, unraveling the persona he stitched together out of fear and fury. You shut his crazy shit down without even raising your hand, and you keep walking past him like he's not the headline everyone swears he is, like he's just noise in a world you've already learned how to navigate. You keep holding that same steady, fearless energy, and every time you do, something inside him breaks a little more, something he swore was unbreakable, something he never expected anyone to touch. And yeah, every time that happens, every time you walk right past the chaos he's depending on, you can practically feel the way he freezes for a second, like his mind hits a wall he didn't install himself. He's built entire chapters of his identity around being the one no one can check, the one no one can touch. And here you are, just existing, and it dismantles his whole operating system. It's wild how your energy does what no weapon, no warning, no army ever managed. He's thrown himself at every limit he could find, trying to prove he can't be stopped, trying to prove he's bigger than fear, bigger than consequences, bigger than anything that dares to stand in his way. And then you show up with that subtle, unbothered presence, and suddenly he's second-guessing things he never questioned. People keep trying to understand what it is about you that flips his script. They watch him tear through the city like a storm. They watch him laugh while everything burns. They watch him move like nothing in this world could ever slow him down. And then they see his expression glitch when you step into the frame. Like he's recalibrating, like something inside him is tugging, tightening, warning him that his whole performance doesn't work on you. And it doesn't. It never has. Because you were never buying the act to begin with. There's a steadiness in you that he can't replicate, can't mock, can't tear apart. You stay grounded while he throws emotional fireworks, and the contrast is brutal. You become the mirror he didn't ask for, the one that reflects back everything he tries to bury under unpredictability and theatrics. He can scream, he can joke, he can threaten, he can twist the entire atmosphere into something unnerving. But the second your eyes settle on him, without fear, without awe, without a single ounce of hesitation, that's when the cracks start showing. Like his madness suddenly feels unnecessary, like his rage feels smaller, like he's performing for someone who refuses to clap. And it's weirdly poetic in a messed up way. He tries to swallow the world whole, and you undo him with a breath. You walk in with the quiet confidence of someone who's seen worse, survived worse. Built yourself from the ground up without needing chaos as a crutch. Your strength doesn't shout. It doesn't posture. It doesn't need an audience. It just exists, and that alone shifts the entire dynamic. Every time you step closer, his heartbeat betrays him. Every time you speak, his madness falters for a split second. Every time you stand your ground, something inside him collapses with a soft, heavy sound he pretends no one can hear. And maybe he hates that, or maybe he needs it more than he'll ever admit. Because there's this part of him, buried under layers of noise and trauma and ego, that recognizes you as something terrifyingly real. Something he can't corrupt, something he can't twist, something he can't break without breaking himself in the process. You've become the boundary he crashes into again and again, trying to understand why you don't shatter like everyone else. You've become the reality check he never agreed to, the one thing that pulls him out of the spiral he keeps pretending he controls. You've become the presence that forces him to confront his own reflection instead of hiding behind the chaos he worships. And you do it effortlessly. That's the part that destroys him. You're not trying to overpower him. You're not trying to dominate the room. You're not even trying to teach him anything. You're just being you. And it's enough to strip the madness right out of his hands. There's this tension in the air whenever you cross paths. This silent electricity that makes even the city lean in, as if everyone can sense that you're the one person whose energy actually interferes with his circuitry. Like you're the glitch in his system, the one flaw in his invincible myth. He keeps trying to figure you out, keeps studying you like you're some impossible equation, keeps circling around your presence, trying to decode how someone so calm can dismantle someone so chaotic. And he never finds the answer, because the answer isn't in anything you do. It's in who you are, in the way your strength doesn't rely on noise, in the way your power doesn't need spectacle, in the way your confidence sits low, steady, rooted, impossible to shake. He can swing a whole city into madness, but he can't sway you an inch. He can light fires in every direction, but he can't burn through your composure. He can scream down the skyline, but your silence still hits harder than anything he throws. And he feels that every single time, like a bruise he can't hide, a reminder stamped into the core of him that you're the one force in his story he can't manipulate or outrun. And it keeps eating at him. This quiet realization that every chaotic move he makes, every twisted little stunt he pulls, every unpredictable outburst that normally sends people scrambling just loses its edge when you're around. He'll throw the whole city into a frenzy, and you'll just stand there watching him like you've already seen the ending. It's unsettling in a way he's never prepared for. There's this flicker he gets when he notices you. You've seen it. That half second where his smirk hesitates, where his eyes shift like he's trying to read something in your face that he can't quite decode. He masks it quick, buries it under jokes or shouting or wild theatrics. But it's there, right under the surface. That tiny flash of, oh shit, it's them. And honestly, you don't even have to try. It's the way you exist, the way you carry yourself, the way you won't shrink for anyone. You walk into the room like the ground already knows your weight, like the air has to adjust around you. And he feels that. He feels it all the way down to the parts of him he hides behind the madness. Other people react to him. They flinch, they fear, they panic, they fall apart. But you walk in with that steady, grounded presence, and suddenly he's the one reacting. His chaos stutters, his timing slips, His whole vibe cracks, like he's caught off guard in a story he thought he controlled. And yeah, he hates that, but he's also drawn to it, like a moth pressed against the flame that refuses to flicker. Your energy doesn't just shut him down, it rewires the entire scene. He could be mid-rant, mid-threat, mid-performance, and one look at you derails the whole thing. It's like he remembers, in real time, that all his noise doesn't move you. Your quiet has more gravity than his chaos. Your composure has more bite than his rage. You don't match his madness with bigger madness. You neutralize it by refusing to step into it. You drain the power out of the performance because you refuse to clap for it. And that's the part that really tears at him. He's used to controlling the atmosphere. He's used to bending rooms around his presence. He's used to being the one who decides how shaken people feel. But you're different. You walk in, and the whole script malfunctions. Your energy cuts through the tension, like it's nothing, like you've already survived storms way louder than him. There's this weight you carry that isn't loud, isn't flashy, but it's real in a way people can feel even before you speak. You've been through enough to know that chaos is just noise unless you let it get inside you. You've faced things that didn't give you time to panic. You've learned the kind of resilience that doesn't need to brag. He senses that. It rattles him. It forces him into a version of himself he doesn't know how to navigate. Because you're not scared of him, not impressed by him, not hypnotized by the spectacle. You look at the monster everyone whispers about, and your expression doesn't change. It's not arrogance, not ego, not bravado. It's just this grounded, almost bored assurance that you've seen worse, survived worse, will keep surviving long after his noise burns out. And he feels small in that presence, no matter how hard he tries to hide it. He feels like the mask doesn't fit anymore. He feels like the world finally stopped indulging him, right there in your stare. It's the kind of thing that makes him want to lash out, to go bigger, to throw more chaos in your direction just to see if he can crack you. But he never does, not really, because something in him knows he won't win that fight. Something in him knows you don't fight on his level. Something in him knows your strength comes from a place he can't corrupt. You shut his crazy shit down with a look, with a breath, with the way your energy refuses to bow, and it leaves him standing there, stripped of the power he's spent years constructing, and it keeps building on itself, this weird, almost electric tension between who he thinks he is and who he turns into the second you're in the room. You can literally watch the shift happen in real time. His shoulders pull back a little less. His voice gets just a shade too sharp, like he's overcompensating. His grin stretches the way people smile when they're not sure if they're still in control. It's subtle, yeah, but it's there. That tiny tell he hopes nobody catches, that flicker that says your presence hits deeper than any threat he's ever faced. He's dealt with cops, criminals, killers, entire crowds losing their minds, but none of that ever touched him the way your calm does. There's something about you that drags the truth out of him without saying a word, like he's performing on a stage where the lights suddenly got too bright and all the makeup started melting. He can't hide in the noise with you watching. He can't drown himself in chaos when your silence keeps pulling him out of it. And he tries, he tries to keep the mask on. He cracks jokes a little louder. He paces a little faster. He amps up the unpredictability, like throwing more chaos at you will make you blink for once. But you don't. You just stand in that grounded, unshaken way, and it messes with him in ways he doesn't even have language for. People underestimate how powerful it is to stay steady in front of someone who thrives on making others wobble. They don't realize how terrifying real composure can be to someone who survives off reaction. He pushes because he needs people to push back, and you're just not playing. And that's the part that gets under his skin. Your presence becomes this invisible boundary he keeps running into. Like no matter how wild he gets, no matter how many tricks he pulls, you're just not buying it. You're not feeding the chaos. You're not validating the performance. Hey, I'm glad you showed up today. Really. Because this isn't random. You didn't just click this. You felt it pulling at you before you even knew why. Now listen. You think you're just you. Just another person trying to survive. Just another face in the crowd. Just another mind scrolling, coping, getting through the day. And, look, I get why you think that. The bills don't stop. The phone keeps buzzing. People talk over you, past you, like your background noise. Life keeps asking you to be smaller, quieter, easier to digest. So you start saying it yourself. I'm just me. Nothing special, nothing cosmic about this. But see, that's where the lie lives. Because while you're telling yourself you're ordinary, the higher realms already recognized you. Yeah, recognized. Not noticed, not glanced at, recognized. Like, oh, you're back. You ever wonder why you've always felt out of sync? Why normal advice never fully worked on you? Why you could be in a room full of people and still feel like you're tuned to a different frequency? That's not anxiety. That's memory. You've been carrying this quiet pressure your whole life. This sense that you're meant for something heavier, something sharper, something more real. And you couldn't explain it without sounding crazy, so you learned to shut up about it. You learned to laugh it off. You learned to say, nah, it's not that deep. But it is that deep, because ordinary souls don't feel this kind of weight. They don't question reality at 2 a.m. They don't feel rage and compassion in the same breath. They don't see through systems and still feel trapped inside them. You do. And that's the joke, isn't it? The cruel cosmic joke. You're walking around pretending to be small in a world that already clocked your return. You think the higher realms care about your job title, your follower count, your resume. No. See, they don't recognize status. They recognize signal. And your signal, it's loud. That's why life keeps hitting you harder than it hits others. That's why your breakdowns cut deeper. That's why your awakenings don't come gently. You weren't built for comfort. You were built for impact. And yeah, I know. That pisses you off. Because you didn't ask for this. You just wanted peace. You just wanted to feel normal for once. But normal was never on your contract. You didn't come back to blend in. You came back to disrupt patterns, to carry truths people don't want to hear, to feel things other people numb out from. That feeling you get, that quiet anger mixed with clarity, that's not you being broken. That's you remembering that you've played this game before, remembering that you don't buy the illusions anymore, remembering that pretending costs you more energy than standing alone ever could. And look, I'm not saying this makes life easier. It makes it heavier, lonelier sometimes, sharper, but it also makes you dangerous in the best way. Because once you stop saying, I'm just me, once you stop shrinking your intuition to make other people comfortable, Once you stop doubting that pull inside your chest, things start responding to you differently. People feel exposed around you. Systems start resisting you. Truth starts leaking out wherever you walk. And that's when you realize, oh, this wasn't random suffering. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't you being too much. This was training. You came back with awareness wired into you, with chaos tolerance, with the ability to sit in darkness and still think clearly. That's why you don't break the way they expect you to. That's why even on your worst days, something in you stays awake. You think you're just you, but the higher realms already adjusted when you showed up. They felt the shift. They marked the timeline. They said, okay, the one who remembers is here. And you can keep playing small if you want. You can keep calling it imagination. You can keep pretending that pull isn't real. But deep down, you know. You've always known. There's a reason your life doesn't fit clean narratives. There's a reason you're drawn to chaos and clarity at the same time. There's a reason comfort feels like a cage to you. You're not here to sleepwalk. You're here to wake things up. And whether you like it or not, whether you accept it today or fight it for another year, you were recognized the moment you came back. And that recognition didn't come with applause or fireworks either. It came quietly, subtle, almost disrespectful in how casual it was. Like, yeah, there you are. And that's the part nobody tells you about. You expect destiny to feel dramatic, cinematic, loud. Instead, it feels like pressure in your chest when you try to live a small life. Like static under your skin when you ignore your instincts. Like irritation when people settle for shallow answers and call it wisdom. You ever notice that? How pretending drains you faster than effort ever does. You can grind all day, sleep 4 hours, carry weight nobody sees, and still keep moving. But the moment you lie to yourself, you're exhausted, empty, irritable for no clear reason. That's not burnout. That's resistance. That's your system rejecting a fake version of you. See, ordinary people get tired from doing too much. You get tired from not being enough of yourself. And yeah, that messes with your head, makes you question your sanity, makes you wonder if you're arrogant for thinking there's more to you. But arrogance is loud and fragile. What you're carrying is quiet and heavy. You don't brag about it. You don't even talk about it. You just feel it sitting there, waiting, like a loaded thought you've never fully finished. And look, let's be real for a second. If you were truly just you, life wouldn't keep testing you like this. It wouldn't keep stripping things away. It wouldn't keep isolating you right when you start getting comfortable. But comfort has never been your teacher. Discomfort sharpens you. Confusion forces you inward. Loss burns away whatever isn't real. You didn't come back to be protected. You came back to be refined. That's why your life has these weird restarts. Why things collapse right when you think you figured them out. Why you outgrow people, jobs, beliefs faster than expected. It's not instability, it's calibration. And I know you hate that word. Sounds spiritual, abstract, like something people say to avoid accountability. But this isn't avoidance. This is confrontation with yourself, with your potential, with the parts of you that scare you because they don't fit into polite society. You see patterns too fast. You feel energy before words. You sense when something's off, even when everyone else is nodding along. And that makes people uncomfortable, because awareness is contagious, and not everyone wants to wake up. So they minimize you. They label you intense. They say you overthink. They tell you to relax. But notice, they never say you're wrong. And that's the part that should mess with you a little, in a good way, because deep down, you already know you're not here to follow scripts written by people who never questioned the stage. You're here to look at the whole setup and go, yeah, this doesn't add up, and then sit with that discomfort instead of numbing it. You ever catch yourself holding back in conversations? Like, you could say more, but you don't. You could go deeper, but you won't. Not because you can't. Because you don't want to deal with the fallout. That's awareness again. That's restraint. That's you knowing your words carry weight, even when you pretend they don't. Even when you try to sound casual. Even when you joke it away. You don't just speak. You shift rooms. And that's why you've learned to be careful. To downplay. To keep the volume low. Because every time you've leaned fully into who you are, something changed. Someone reacted. Something broke. Something ended. But here's the thing you've been circling around without saying out loud. It was always going to break. Anything built on a version of you that wasn't real was already on borrowed time. You didn't destroy it. You exposed it. And yeah, that makes you the villain in some people's stories. The disruptor. The problem. The one who couldn't just be normal. But normal never carried truth. Normal carries compliance. You carry awareness, and awareness doesn't blend in. It doesn't soften itself to fit group chats and office politics and surface-level connections. It stands there quietly, watching, waiting, letting people reveal themselves. That's why you're hard to manipulate. That's why guilt tactics don't work on you for long. That's why you feel physical discomfort when you betray your own values. Your body knows before your mind catches up. And that recognition from the higher realms, from whatever name you want to give it, that recognition is active, it's ongoing. It responds when you choose honesty over convenience, when you sit with discomfort instead of running, when you stop asking for permission to trust what you already see. You don't need a crown. You don't need a title. You don't need external validation. You need alignment. And alignment feels like tension before it feels like clarity. It feels like standing alone even when you're surrounded. It feels like being misunderstood and still choosing not to explain yourself. You've been mistaking that feeling for loneliness. It's sovereignty. And the more you step into it, the more life stops treating you gently. Not because you're being punished, because you're being challenged at your actual level. Not the level you pretend to be at to make things easier. The real one. You don't get beginner lessons anymore. You get pressure tests. And every time you survive one, something in you clicks a little louder, a little clearer. Like remembering a skill you forgot you had. Like muscle memory returning. After years of pretending you were weak, you think you're just you. But everything in your life keeps responding like you're something more awake than you let on. And that awareness doesn't clock out. Ever. You don't get to turn it off just because you're tired or because you want a quiet life. It hums in the background when you're laughing with people who don't really see you. It taps on your skull when you're about to make a choice that looks smart on paper, but feels wrong in your gut. It shows up when you're alone, staring at nothing, feeling everything. And, yeah, that part frustrates you. Because you watch other people move through life on autopilot and you think, how are they not bothered by this? How are they okay with half-truths? surface-level conversations, routines that feel like slow erosion. You try to explain it once or twice, gently, casually, and they look at you like you're doing too much. So you stop explaining. You nod, you smile, you play along. But inside you're pacing. Inside you're peeling layers back, questioning motives, sensing undercurrents, reading between lines nobody else even notices exist. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. That's the part of you that's been awake longer than this lifetime. And look, see, there's this weird guilt you carry too. Like you owe it to people to stay small. Like stepping fully into who you are would somehow hurt them. You've been taught, subtly, that dimming yourself is kindness, that restraint is humility, that silence is maturity. But humility doesn't mean erasing yourself. Maturity doesn't mean self-betrayal. And every time you choose comfort over truth, something in you stiffens, hardens, not bitter, just disappointed. Like you let yourself down in a way nobody else could even notice. You feel that disappointment more sharply than praise. Compliments slide off you. Approval feels temporary. But that inner misalignment, that sticks. It lingers. It shows up as restlessness, as insomnia, as that low-grade irritation you can't quite explain, because you weren't wired to live against yourself. You ever realize how you're always evolving, faster than your environment? How by the time people catch up to who you were, you've already outgrown that version. That's lonely. Deeply lonely. And you've learned not to talk about that loneliness because it sounds ungrateful. Because you are grateful. You just want something that matches your depth. You want conversations that don't feel like filler. Work that doesn't feel like slow suffocation. Connections that don't require you to edit your instincts. And you've had glimpses of it, too. Moments where you're fully present, fully aligned, and everything feels sharp and alive. Time moves differently. Your voice sounds clearer. Your posture changes without you thinking about it. Those moments aren't accidents. They're reminders. And then life pulls you back into the noise. Responsibilities, expectations, roles you never consciously chose. And you adapt, because you're good at adapting. You've always been good at surviving in environments that don't quite fit. But survival isn't your ceiling. And yeah, that's scary. Because stepping beyond survival means letting go of identities that kept you safe. It means disappointing people who benefited from you staying predictable. It means standing in uncertainty without rushing to fill the silence. You don't rush anymore, do you? Not like before. You've slowed down in a way that confuses people. You think before you speak. You pause before you react. You sit with discomfort longer than most. That's not hesitation. That's control. You're not impulsive. You're deliberate. And deliberate people terrify systems built on distraction. That's why you feel this constant pressure to be faster, louder, more visible, more marketable. But you don't move like that. You move when it's real, when it matters, when it aligns. And when you do move, things shift. You've noticed that too. When you finally decide, there's no half step, no maybe, no going back. It's quiet, internal, almost boring from the outside. And then suddenly your entire life reorganizes around that choice. That's not luck. That's authority. And authority doesn't need permission. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek consensus. It just is. It's felt. By you first. By others later. You've been mistaking that inner gravity for pressure, for stress, for heaviness. But gravity isn't a flaw. It's a force. It bends things. It pulls truth closer. It refuses to be ignored. That's why shallow environments feel unbearable to you. That's why performative positivity irritates you. That's why you can sense when someone's lying, even if they're smiling. You're not cynical. You're calibrated. And that calibration didn't happen overnight. It happened through disappointment, through betrayal, through moments where you realized nobody was coming to save you, and something in you said, "Fine, I've got this." That voice, that's not ego, that's remembrance. You didn't come back empty. You came back with instincts sharpened by experience, with awareness earned through friction, with a nervous system that reacts to truth like a tuning fork. And the more you listen to it, the harder it becomes to pretend you're just drifting through life. You're not drifting, you're navigating, even when it feels messy, even when you doubt yourself, even when you pause longer than others would. There's intention under the uncertainty. There's direction inside the chaos. There's a deeper intelligence moving through you that doesn't need to shout to be real. You think you're just you, but everything about you resists being reduced to that. And that resistance shows up in the smallest, most annoying ways. Like when you try to half commit to something that doesn't really match you, and your chest tightens for no logical reason. Or when you agree to things you don't believe in just to keep the peace. And later you're replaying the moment in your head thinking, why did I say yes to that? You feel it immediately. The delay between misalignment and consequence is short for you. Other people can fake it for years. You can't fake it for a week. And, yeah, that's isolating. Because you start realizing you don't get the luxury of ignorance. You don't get to hide behind, "I didn't know." You always know. Even when you wish you didn't. Even when knowing complicates your life instead of simplifying it. You've tried ignoring that voice, haven't you? Tried drowning it out with distractions, routines, noise. Tried convincing yourself you were overreacting, reading too much into things. But the voice doesn't argue. It doesn't panic. It just waits, calm, patient, like it knows time is on its side. And it is. Because every time you don't listen, life escalates. A little more friction, a little more discomfort. Not to punish you, to get your attention. You've noticed the pattern. You drift. Things get heavy. You realign. Things flow. It's almost annoying how consistent it is. You're not being controlled. You're being corrected. And see, look, correction feels personal when you're attached to who you thought you were supposed to be. When you've invested years into an identity that looked good, sounded responsible, made sense to other people, letting that crack feels like failure. But it's not failure. It's shedding. You've been peeling layers without realizing it. Old beliefs, old loyalties, old versions of strength that were really just endurance. You don't tolerate what you used to. You don't explain yourself the way you used to. You don't chase approval the way you used to. That's not arrogance, that's clarity. And clarity makes people nervous. Because it can't be negotiated with. You can't guilt it. You can't gaslight it. You can't dress it up and sell it something it doesn't want. You either meet it, or you feel exposed by it. That's why some people drift away quietly. That's why others push back harder. That's why a few suddenly start competing with you for no clear reason. You didn't change into someone threatening. You stopped pretending you weren't. And that's the part you're still adjusting to. The way your presence carries weight, even when you're silent. The way people project onto you, assume things about you, react to you without you doing anything at all. You walk into rooms and dynamics shift before you speak. You've felt that. You've wondered if it was in your head. It's not. You don't just occupy space. You influence it. And influence without intention is dangerous, which is why you've always been hyper-aware of your impact. You check yourself constantly. You analyze your tone. You replay conversations, not because you're insecure, but because you care. Because you know words don't land the same when they come from you. You don't get to be careless. You get to be precise. That precision didn't come from confidence. It came from consequences. From moments where you realized your honesty can cut deeper than you intended. From times when speaking your truth shattered illusions people were clinging to. You didn't enjoy that power. You respected it. And respect is what separates awareness from ego. You don't want control over people. You want alignment with yourself. And alignment feels lonely before it feels stable. It strips away shortcuts. It removes buffers. It forces you to sit with uncertainty without asking for reassurance every 5 minutes. You've been doing that quietly, internally, while everyone else assumes you've got it easy because you're composed. They don't see the internal negotiations, the constant calibration, the restraint it takes to stay grounded when you see 10 moves ahead. You don't panic easily. You don't explode often. But when you do feel something strongly, it's deep, rooted, earned. That emotional range, that's not volatility. That's capacity. You can hold contradiction. You can feel anger without losing clarity. You can feel compassion without becoming weak. You can stand in discomfort without needing to numb it immediately. That's rare. And rare things don't blend in. They don't move fast. They don't rush to be understood. They let time reveal them. You've been letting time work on you, grinding you down in some places, strengthening you in others, teaching you when to speak and when to watch, when to act and when to wait. Look at you. Yeah, you. You made it today, and that already says something. You walked in here carrying years on your back, and somehow you're still standing taller than people half your age. And that's exactly why they're staring. That's exactly why their smiles don't reach their eyes. Because, see, you weren't supposed to look this good. You weren't supposed to move like this. You weren't supposed to age and upgrade at the same time. And that messes with them. Let's be real for a second. They were told a story, same one everyone hears. You peak early. Time takes from you. Gravity wins. Energy fades. You slow down. And then there's you, still sharp, still magnetic, still evolving. I mean, what do they do with that? They don't clap for it. They don't celebrate it. They resent it. Because every year you didn't disappear, you exposed a lie they built their comfort on. Look, jealousy isn't loud at first. It's subtle. It's the pause before the compliment, the backhanded jokes, the must-be-nice tone. The way they bring up your age like it's supposed to humble you, like it's supposed to put you back in your place. But it doesn't. It never does. And that's what eats at them. See, you didn't just survive time, you used it. While they were numbing themselves, you were paying attention. While they were chasing validation, you were stacking perspective. While they were trying to look young, you were learning how to look dangerous. Yeah, dangerous, because there's nothing more unsettling than someone who knows who they are and still looks good doing it. You've got that calm now, that grounded energy that I've seen enough to not panic look in your eyes. And people feel that before you even say a word. You don't need to announce yourself. Your presence does it for you. And that terrifies people who thought age was supposed to weaken you. Because what they don't want to admit, what they really don't want to say out loud, is that you're proof. Proof that discipline beats denial. Proof that growth compounds. Proof that aging doesn't ruin you. Avoidance does. And every time they see you, they see the bill for the time they wasted. So yeah, they project, they criticize, they whisper, they scroll back on your photos like detectives looking for decline. And they don't find it. They find refinement. They find someone who stopped apologizing for taking up space. Someone who stopped begging to be chosen. Someone who knows that attraction isn't about youth. It's about alignment, energy, intent, self-respect. You didn't get lucky, you got intentional. And that's the part they can't copy. Because you can't fake the glow that comes from self-trust. You can't imitate the confidence that comes from surviving your own storms. You can't Photoshop the kind of presence that comes from knowing you don't need approval anymore. You've reached that phase where you don't chase rooms. You change them. And look, let's not pretend you didn't pay for this version of yourself. You paid in loneliness, in hard resets, in letting go of people who only liked the old, easier version of you. You paid in nights where you had to choose growth over comfort, truth over popularity. Most people don't make those choices. So when they see you now, centered, attractive, evolving, it triggers something ugly in them, something unresolved, something they hoped time would hide. But time didn't hide it. Time highlighted it. And here's the thing, you're not aging backwards. That's the joke. You're aging forward, properly. You're letting life sharpen you instead of dull you. You're letting pressure shape you instead of crush you. And deep down, they know it. That's why they watch. That's why they compare. That's why your age bothers them more than it bothers you. Because your age isn't a weakness anymore. It's leverage. You carry experience without bitterness, confidence without arrogance, presence without noise. And when you walk away, people feel the absence. That's power, quiet power. The kind that doesn't need permission. So let them be confused. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them wonder how you did it. You don't owe them an explanation. You're not supposed to look this good. You're not supposed to feel this solid. You're not supposed to keep evolving. And yet, here you are, still rising, still rising. Yeah, and you feel it in the way rooms go quiet when you enter. Not dramatic quiet, subtle. That shift, that recalibration, like people are unconsciously adjusting their posture around you. Because age didn't make you smaller, it gave you weight, gravity, authority you didn't ask for but earned anyway. See, you're not trying anymore. And that's the part nobody warns them about. You stopped trying to impress, stopped explaining, stopped shrinking your edges to keep people comfortable. You show up as is, calm, observant, unrushed. And that alone separates you from most people walking around pretending they've got it together. They feel that contrast. You ever notice how the comments changed? Less playful, more pointed. Questions disguised as jokes. "What's your secret?" asked with a weird tone, like they're hoping you'll say luck. Genetics. Anything that lets them off the hook. Anything except discipline, consistency, self-respect. Because if it's those things, then it means they could have done something too. And look, you didn't wake up one day magically confident. This came from choosing yourself over and over when it wasn't cute. When nobody clapped, when growth felt lonely, when you had to sit with uncomfortable truths about your habits, your standards, the people you kept around just to avoid silence. You cleaned house internally. Most people don't. They age on the outside and stay the same on the inside. Same triggers, same excuses, same emotional reactions from 10 years ago, same coping mechanisms. And then they see you, older, sharper, more composed, and it hits them like an audit they didn't prepare for. Because you're not frantic, you're not thirsty, you're not chasing timelines that don't belong to you. You move with patience now. Intentional steps, fewer words, better choices, and that energy. It reads as confidence before you ever say anything. That's why they misinterpret you. They call it arrogance. Distance. Intimidating. Nah, it's clarity. You know what you bring. You know what you won't tolerate. You know what you're building and what doesn't get access anymore. That certainty, it's rare. And rare things make insecure people uncomfortable. Especially when time was supposed to humble you. But instead time refined you. Your face tells stories now, not damage, depth. Your body moves like it understands itself. Your eyes don't rush, they assess. And when you speak, there's weight behind it, because you don't speak just to be heard anymore. That's grown energy, earned presence, and the wild part. You're still curious, still learning, still open. You didn't calcify, you didn't turn bitter. You didn't lock yourself into nostalgia and complain about how things used to be. You adapted, you stayed sharp, you stayed relevant without chasing relevance. That balance, right there, that's rare too. They don't know how to categorize you. You're not past your prime. You're not chasing youth. You're not stuck in the past. You're operating in a different lane entirely. And yeah, that messes with people who built their identity on being young instead of being solid. People who thought time would excuse their lack of effort. People who assumed confidence would just show up one day without any internal work being done. Then there's you. Proof walking around that evolution is a choice. You didn't beat time. You partnered with it. Every year added something instead of taking something away. Better boundaries, better instincts, better taste in people, less tolerance for nonsense, more patience for things that actually matter. And that kind of progression, it shows. In your posture, in your voice, in the way you don't react immediately anymore. You pause, you observe, you choose. That restraint, that's attractive, that control, that's intimidating. Because anyone can be loud, anyone can be young, anyone can be impulsive. But not everyone can be composed under pressure. Not everyone can carry experience without wearing it like a burden. Not everyone can keep evolving instead of settling into excuses. You did, and they see it every time they look at you, every single time, whether they admit it or not. And it doesn't even matter if they say your name out loud. You feel it in the way conversations shift when you speak, in the way opinions suddenly get quieter, in the way people start watching instead of talking. See, there's this moment, you probably noticed it, where someone realizes you're not here to compete anymore. You're not racing anyone. You're not proving anything. You're not chasing validation from rooms that never fed you anyway. And that realization, it disarms people. Because competition, they understand. Comparison, they live in. But certainty, that calm certainty you carry now, that messes with them. You move like someone who's already lost what needed to be lost. Like someone who already survived the part that breaks most people. And that's why you don't flinch the way you used to. You don't over-explain. You don't rush to defend yourself. Silence doesn't scare you anymore. You let pauses sit. And in those pauses, People project everything they're afraid of becoming. They tell themselves stories about you. That you're lucky. That you had help. That it must be easy for you. Anything that keeps them from looking too closely at their own reflection. Anything that avoids the uncomfortable truth that you chose a discomfort early, and now you get to move differently. Because you earned this ease, you earned the way you walk into spaces without shrinking. The way you don't dress for approval anymore. You dress like you know who you are. The way your confidence isn't loud, but it's undeniable. It's in your eye contact, in your pace, in how you listen more than you speak. You know, younger versions of you wanted to be liked. This version wants alignment, and that shift alone rewired everything. You stopped explaining your worth to people who never planned on understanding it. You stopped negotiating your standards just to avoid being alone. You stopped entertaining energy that felt off just because it was familiar. Familiarity kept people stuck. You chose growth. And growth doesn't age you, it sharpens you. That's why you look the way you do. That's why your presence hits the way it hits. It's not skincare. It's not genetics. It's not trends. It's the absence of self-betrayal. It's years of telling yourself the truth, even when it cost you comfort. Most people never stop betraying themselves. You did. And that integrity, it shows. In how you don't rush to post everything anymore. In how you don't need constant validation. In how you don't overshare to feel seen. You're selective now. Intentional. Grounded. You move like someone who knows attention isn't power. Control is. People feel that shift instantly. They sense you're not desperate to be understood. That you're okay being misunderstood by people who never took the time to really see you anyway. That you're not trying to be impressive. You're trying to be real, and real ages well. Real gets better with time. That's the part nobody prepared them for. That age didn't dull your edge. It refined it. That experience didn't harden you. It stabilized you. That you didn't lose your spark. You learned how to aim it. You carry yourself like someone who knows storms pass, because you've already walked through a few. You speak with restraint because you learned words matter. You choose carefully because you know what chaos costs. And when people compare themselves to you, quietly, internally, they feel the gap, not in age, in awareness, in discipline, in self-respect. That's why your age bothers them. That's why your glow feels unfair to them. That's why your calm feels threatening. Because you're not supposed to look this good if you did the work honestly. But you did. And it keeps showing. In the smallest details, too. The way you don't rush your answers anymore. The way you smile without needing anything back. The way your silence carries more weight than most people's speeches. You know that feeling when you stop reacting and start choosing? Yeah, that. See, you've outgrown urgency, and urgency is what most people confuse for passion. You're not scrambling anymore. You're deliberate, calculated without being cold, present without being loud. And people don't know how to read that, because they're used to chaos being mistaken for confidence. You don't leak energy like that anymore. You conserve it, and that alone changes how you look, how you move, how you age. Stress leaves marks on people who refuse to face themselves. You faced yourself early, again and again. You sat with the uncomfortable stuff, the ego deaths, the quiet recalibrations, the moments where nobody saw you rebuilding because it wasn't aesthetic yet. That kind of inner work shows up externally, whether people like it or not. Your face doesn't hold desperation. Your body doesn't hold panic. Your eyes don't dart around looking for approval. You're settled, and settled people glow. differently. That's why they keep circling back with questions that don't really ask anything, fishing, testing, trying to figure out what changed, hoping there's a shortcut they missed, hoping you'll say something that makes it all sound easy. But it wasn't easy. You rewired habits, you cut patterns that felt like home, you disappointed people who benefited from you staying small. You chose long-term alignment over short-term comfort more times than anyone ever noticed. And the thing is, your age tells that story quietly. Not in wrinkles, in restraint, not in lines, in discipline, not in decline, in control. That's why comparisons get weird around you. People start measuring themselves against a version of aging they weren't prepared for. One that doesn't collapse, one that doesn't fade, one that doesn't beg for relevance. You didn't chase relevance. You became solid. And solid lasts. You know, there's a moment when someone realizes you're not competing on the same timeline, that you're not rushing milestones to keep up, that you're not panicking about being behind, that you're not clinging to youth like it's the only currency you have. That moment hits them hard, because you're proof that depth compounds, that patience pays interest, that self-respect keeps you attractive longer than trends ever could, that growth doesn't have an expiration date unless you give it one. You're not loud about it. You don't announce it. You just live it. And that quiet consistency, it unsettles people who built their identity on noise. They see how you don't chase conversations anymore. You curate them, how you don't argue, you disengage, how you don't prove, you observe, how you don't rush, you arrive exactly when you mean to. That composure didn't come from age alone. It came from awareness, and awareness changes everything. It changes how you carry disappointment, how you process rejection, how you recover from loss. You don't spiral the way you used to. You don't catastrophize. You don't personalize every setback. You've seen enough cycles to know nothing is permanent. Not wins, not losses, not opinions. That stability, yeah, it shows on you. It shows in the way people lean in when you speak, in the way your presence slows rooms down, in the way you don't need to dominate space to own it. You already know who you are when nobody's watching, and that's why they keep looking, trying to figure out how time didn't take from you what it took from them. Trying to understand how you're standing there, experienced, composed, magnetic, when the script said you were supposed to be fading, slowing, settling. But you didn't follow the script. You rewrote it quietly, consistently, without applause. And it keeps unfolding in real time, every day, without you even announcing it. And the funny thing is, you're not trying to be an example. You're just living differently. That's it. That's the whole disruption. You woke up one day and decided to stop performing for people who never planned on staying anyway. And look, that choice rearranged everything. You don't wake up anxious the way you used to. Your mind doesn't immediately go into comparison mode. You're not checking the room to see where you rank. You already know where you stand with yourself. And that internal alignment, it settles into your body. It relaxes your shoulders. It steadies your breath. It changes the way your face rests when you're not thinking about it. That's why people say you look different. Not younger, different, like someone who's not carrying unnecessary weight anymore. Emotional weight, mental clutter, the need to explain every move, the need to be seen as nice or easy or agreeable. You dropped that, and once you drop it, your energy sharpens. You don't leak power anymore. People feel that immediately. They might not have the language for it, but they feel it. They sense you're not easily shaken, that you won't fold under mild pressure, that you're not scrambling for relevance or reassurance, that you're not afraid of silence or distance and silence. Yeah, silence is a luxury most people can't afford emotionally. You can. You've learned how to sit with yourself without needing distraction. You don't need constant noise to feel alive. You don't need chaos to feel important. You don't need drama to feel desired. That level of self-sufficiency, it rewires attraction, because desperation ages people fast. Peace keeps you sharp. You chose peace, even when it meant fewer people around you, even when it meant awkward transitions, even when it meant walking away without closure because you realized closure isn't something other people give you. It's something you decide. That decision alone aged you forward. And yeah, people notice when someone their age or older moves like this. When someone doesn't cling, when someone doesn't beg, when someone doesn't panic about being replaced or forgotten, when someone trusts their value without constantly advertising it. They don't know what to do with that. They start projecting timelines onto you. Expectations, quiet judgments, subtle digs about age, like time is supposed to embarrass you, like it's supposed to catch up to you any second now. But it doesn't, because you're not fighting time. You're synced with it. You rest when you need to. You move when it's aligned. You don't overextend just to prove stamina. You don't say yes just to stay included. You don't force momentum when clarity hasn't landed yet. That kind of pacing, it keeps you intact. Most people burn themselves out trying to outrun their insecurities. You stopped running. You turned around and faced them one by one, uncomfortable, unfiltered, honest. That work didn't just change your mindset. It changed your nervous system. It changed how stress hits you. It changed how conflict lands. It changed how your body holds tension. That's why your presence feels grounded instead of frantic. That's why your age looks like seasoning, not decay. People sense you've lived, but you're not worn down. You're not jaded. You didn't close off. You refined. You edited. You kept what mattered and dropped what didn't. That discernment shows everywhere, in who gets access to you, in how you respond to nonsense, in how quickly you disengage from energy that doesn't respect your pace. You don't need to announce boundaries anymore. You move in a way that makes them obvious. And when people cross them, you don't explode. You withdraw, calmly, cleanly. That restraint, yeah, that's intimidating, because it signals something deeper, that you trust yourself to walk away, that you're not afraid of starting over, that you know your worth doesn't depreciate with time. It clarifies. And when people see that clarity sitting in someone who was supposed to fade by now, it rattles their assumptions. It messes with the narratives they told themselves to feel safe.